Today we're going to talk about the dimensions of religion. In order to have some continuity across the different religions we're going to study, we're going to look at several dimensions of each religion and the same dimensions for each religion we study. The notion of 6 or 7 dimensions to religion, that each religion has these distinct aspects, comes from a religious studies professor, Ninian Smart. He was a professor at UC Santa Barbara and identified what he considered to be the core dimensions or facets of each religion. Together, these dimensions can give us a comprehensive picture of an entire religion or worldview. Of course, these are not exhaustive, and we won't cover everything about any of these religions. Each of these religions are infinitely complex, and what we talk about in class will only be meant as a general introduction to the most important aspects of these religious traditions. It's important that we look at similar facets or dimensions for each religion so that we can have points of comparison and contrast between the traditions. Although historical overview is not one of the dimensions per se of religion as outlined by Smart, it will be important that we begin the study of each religion with a general historical introduction to that religion. It's important that we know where in the world this religious tradition began, when it began, and whether or not it can be traced to a single founder. It's also important to know what the political, religious, or social environment was when and where it began. It's also important to think about whether or not this tradition began as a new religion. We'll see that many traditions actually did not begin as a new religious tradition, but only a reform movement of an earlier religion. Also, many of these religions are actually a collection of beliefs, but have been grouped together into an ism, so it's important to know that there may not be one overarching belief to a certain religion. Lastly, where and how did this religion spread? Does it encourage conversion or not? Has it changed as it has spread into other cultures? And did it spread more through individual conversion or political conquest? Religions tend to organize our lives. They give believers' lives an overall arc that's punctuated at certain times with important events and times at which we are closer to the sacred. Rituals are required or obligatory actions. They are the physical manifestations of faith or belief that every believer is required or at least encouraged to do. Often these rituals have a ceremonial aspect to them, and they may be organized or strict. These are the public ways that people demonstrate their religion. First, there are daily rituals. Many religions require certain actions on a daily basis, as a daily return or reminder of the sacred and one's obligations. A daily ritual could be prayer or meditation. These are the most common daily rituals, but there could also be some sort of study or learning. Second, there are weekly rituals. Many religions have a sacred day of the week, and this day could be marked with worship or some sort of meeting or coming together of believers. For example, Friday is the holy day for Muslims, Saturday for Jews, and Sunday for Christians. There are also frequently monthly rituals. Usually a religion will have either a weekly or monthly ritual. An important distinction here depends on whether they follow a lunar calendar, which relies on the cycles of the moon, or a Gregorian calendar, which is a man-made calendar such as the one we use here in America. Using a lunar calendar seems to show that a religion is more nature-centered because their schedule is based on the moon, while the Gregorian calendar is more of an anthropocentric calendar, which is focused on humanity. For example, the Abrahamic faiths, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, patterned their religion on the actions of humans. Yearly rituals are also quite common. These are our holidays, or holy days, that occur once a year. Most religions have a low or somber time during the year and a festive high time. The year follows this cycle from low to high and back as the seasons change. One is for humbling oneself, and one is for letting loose. There are also important times in each person's life, which we call life cycle rituals. These rituals mark the important moments. Religion formalizes and provides a ceremony and rite of passage to mark each of these times. For example, rituals surrounding a birth, adolescence, adulthood, or death. Every religion has certain sacred stories that they tell to explain the world in which they live. These stories or myths tend to explain the unexplainable in our lives. They explain the beginning of the world, how death enters the world, why certain natural phenomena happen, or what will happen at the end of our individual lives or the end of the world in general. It's important to note here that we're not defining myth as it is often defined in everyday speech, as something fake, not true, or a lie. In a religion, myths are sacred stories, or in a way, stories that are truer than facts. Whether or not religious people believe that they actually occurred or not is a matter of personal faith, but these stories help us to understand human nature and human life. First, there are myths of origins. These tend to be very common and sacred in religions. These stories tell how the world started, how humanity started, and/or how the religion itself started. Was the beginning of the world an act of creation, a single event, or was it a process of evolution? The core elements of the story make a difference in how people live their lives. Second, there are myths of endings. These stories tell both how the world at large will end and what will happen to an individual after death. In terms of the world, these myths can be millennial or amillennial. A millennial view of history is one that believes that we are moving towards a perfect future world, that in general history is moving upwards, getting better and better. There is a future time of perfection that we're waiting for. An amillennial view of time thinks that things are not going to change. The way the world is the way it's always been, and the way it always will be. Examples of these religions would be Taoism, Buddhism, or Confucianism. How people view the future also influences their perspective on this life. If you think history is amillennial, then you accept this life and this world. If you have a millennial view of history, you think this is not the real world, but the world to come. Third, there are historical myths. These myths tell the stories of the most important events in history. What events or persons does this religion consider the most important? Who are the heroes and what makes them heroes? Religions can view history in a linear or cyclical way. If you think that history is linear, then the world is always new, and the believer will value what is new. The new can in fact be sacred. If you think that history is cyclical, then the world will continue to follow the same pattern. Time will follow this pattern. A common symbol of these religions is a circle or something else circular. In these religions, the dead are more advanced than the living because they are farther in this pattern, and these cultures tend to venerate older people and ancestors. Doctrine is how religions organize their beliefs. Religions constitute what we could call a belief system, and this system altogether can be thought of as doctrine. These beliefs need to be organized into doctrine so that practitioners can understand the beliefs more easily. Some religions are more heavily doctrinal than others, as we'll see. The first set of doctrine is the religion's theology. Theology literally means the study of God, or theos in Greek. But more broadly, we can think of it as the religion's belief concerning the source of truth in the world. Where does truth come from in the world? Is it a theistic or non-theistic religion? A theistic religion is one that has a belief in a God or higher power, where a non-theistic religion is one that does not believe in a God, such as Buddhism or Taoism. If a religion is theistic, it can be a personal God or an impersonal God. Does this God interact with humans in this world? Or if there is a God, this God could also be aloof and not communicate with people. The second set of doctrines is the religion's cosmology. Cosmos means the world, so it is that religion's conception and attitudes towards the world in which we live, and more particularly, where in this cosmos can we find the source of truth? How do we find out more about that source of truth? Some religions tend to look more towards the natural world, while others say that we need more. We need revelation from a higher power to discover this truth. The theistic religions would be more likely to think that the natural world alone cannot tell us what we need to know, but that the higher power needs to in some way intercede in this world so that we can find that truth. Religions, however, usually fall on a spectrum between the two. The third set of doctrines is the soteriology of the religion. Soteriology literally means deliverance or salvation. It deals with the fact that most religions see a problem with the world or with humanity in general. The religion itself is a way to fix that problem. Some see sin as the central problem, some may see ignorance, etc. Soteriology deals with what the religion sees the solution to that problem being, and the soteriology provides a means for living up to that truth. Some religions see the solution coming from self-help, while others believe that the individual needs to look beyond themselves to find the solution. Do we have the solution within ourselves, or do we need help from a higher power or higher truth to fix this problem? The ethical or legal component of a religion deals with how believers make decisions in their everyday lives. We have to make countless decisions every day, and a religion's ethical or legal system helps the believer in making those decisions. Religions can have different approaches to ethics. Some have a set of commands or rules that people must follow. These could include actions to do and actions not to do, or could also outline appropriate thoughts to have. But these are more action-oriented, such as the Abrahamic faiths. Or the religion could focus on motives. The outward action here is not so important as the person's intentions. If the believer can purify their motives or cultivate good intentions, they don't need to worry so much about the actions that they do or don't do, because they always mean to do good. In these religions, actions are ethically neutral, as in Hinduism and Buddhism. Or these ethics could focus more on relationships, and these relationships could be with other people, with animals, or with the world in general. Indigenous religions tend to focus more on the cultivation of meaningful relationships. Religions also have several ethical issues that are important to them. Although most religions are similar in that they do have guidelines for dealing with most of these issues, like wealth, sexuality, violence, and the environment, various religions may emphasize one more than another. Wealth is shunned in some religions, but encouraged in others as a sign of blessings. Sexuality is usually only allowed within marriage. Violence may be completely forbidden or allowed under certain circumstances. And attitudes towards the environment could be more commanding or humble, depending on the tradition. Religions are a society within themselves that must be organized in some way, but they are also a powerful force in the society at large. Religions can have a significant impact on the shaping and culture of the society in which they reside. In terms of how they are a society within themselves, religions differ in terms of how they are organized and who is in charge and why. Who has authority within the religion, and why do they have that authority? Is there a formal ordination process that religious leaders have to undergo, or is the authority based on spiritual powers or a powerful religious experience? Do they require a certain amount of religious knowledge to become a leader, or is a religious experience authority enough? Or is the authority actually inherited, either through blood relations or political descendancy? Some religions bestow authority based on race, or by class, or even by gender. On the other hand, there's the religion's interaction with the society at large. Religions are usually on a spectrum from separation to assimilation. Some religions feel that they need to stand apart from their society, for example, the Amish or some Native American communities. They may see the outer society as containing negative influences, and they need to keep themselves to their own religious community. On the other hand, there can be total assimilation between the religion and society. The society and religion could be one. This happens in societies that have a state religion. Many countries in the Middle East, for example, have a Muslim government, and therefore the society and the religion work together. Again, however, most societies lie somewhere in between. Believers may reject some aspects of the society in which they live, but participate in the society nonetheless, maybe even trying to correct those parts of the society they don't agree with. This is what we call integration, a balance between the two extremes of separation and assimilation. Most religions have a strong emotional or experiential dimension. These experiences can be characterized as interactions with the sacred, whatever that may be in the religion. These experiences are a strong motivator for religious practitioners. It's commonly what motivates individuals to convert to a certain religion or embrace the religion of their family or society. This is the most human and personal element of these religions. However, these experiences vary in nature depending on the religion. The first type is the numinous experience. The idea of the numinous comes from Rudolf Otto, a religious scholar who characterized the holy as the numen. It's the sacred that is completely other from human beings. The numinous experience is characterized by what is called mysterium tremendum et fascinas, which means that God is holy, that God or the holy is mysterious. It's something so different from us that we cannot comprehend it. But it's also tremendous in that it is so much greater and more powerful than us that we quiver before it. but it's also fascinating. So even though it's overwhelming, we're still drawn to it. In the numinous experience, the holy or sacred is other, and the feeling we experience is that of standing before this sacredness and humbled. The mystical experience, however, is quite different. In this type of experience, the sacred is something accessible to human beings. It's not so different from the human him or herself, and the experience is one of joining with or merging with the divine. This experience is often characterized as experiencing God or the divine within ourselves, finding something sacred or holy within us. Only very few religions have one or the other found within them. In most religions that we'll be studying, you'll find some believers who have numinous experiences and some that focus on or claim to have had mystical experiences. And sometimes there are even controversies between these two types of experiences.